Bifocal Chapter 3 J. The car squealed as Kevin pulled away. "I can't believe they canceled football practice," he said angrily. "You better slow down," I warned him. There were still some police cars around. "They're not interested in me," he said. "They've got other things on their minds." I guess he was right about that. We were still confused about what had happened, but obviously it had to be serious, because you don't bring in SWAT teams to issue traffic tickets. Something bad had happened, and football had to take a back seat. Kevin didn't like anything getting in the way of football. For him, football was the most important thing about school. Probably the most important thing, period. Besides being captain, he was the best player on the team. He was a guaranteed prospect for university ball, and it wasn't unusual for 2 or 3 college scouts to be in the bleachers at our games, watching and drooling over him. The scouts' interest in Kevin didn't hurt the rest of us either. Those scouts didn't just see him play. Up until this year, I'd never even considered that I might also be a prospect for college ball. I just never thought about it. Sure, I'd been a star player in my little country school playing against other little country schools, but this was different. This was a big school in a big city, and here I was starting on that team. Now I was seriously thinking about college ball. Kevin squealed around the corner, cutting off another car. The other driver honked, and Kevin put his hand out the window and gestured at him. Kevin was never timid behind the wheel, so being ticked off about practice wasn't about to make him any less aggressive. I didn't care about practice. I was just glad to be out of the building. For the better part of 2 hours we'd sat in the dark, in more ways than one. After a while, Steve had started to call some friends on his cell, trying to piece together what was happening in other parts of the building. Everybody seemed to know a little, but nobody had heard anything about a brawl or a drug bust. The only weapons anybody had seen belonged to the cops. But why so many cops and so many weapons? And why the bomb squad? Had there been a bomb? What could that kid have possibly done? We'd learned that it was not just the exits we'd seen, but every exit in the school had been blocked off by the police. Nobody had been allowed to leave until they'd been checked. At the same time, the special cops had searched the school looking for specific people. As far as anybody had known, only one of the students had been arrested. We didn't know him. Somebody had mentioned a name to Steve, but it was really strange sounding, and now I couldn't even remember it. Just something foreign and funny sounding. We knew who might be brawling or selling drugs. Everybody in the school knew the names of the dealers, but the guy who was arrested was practically a stranger right off the radar. That wasn't so surprising. He was brown, not black. Steve was half black, and a bunch of our teammates were black. The brown kids were from India or Pakistan or someplace in the Middle East. Back in my old school, there was only one brown kid. His parents run the gas station at the edge of town. He was a grade down from me, and although his name was Ali, he insisted that everybody call him Al. He seemed like a pretty good guy. Here at this school, there were lots of brown people. My math class was more brown than white. The brown kids seemed to spend a lot of time in the library, and they sat at their own tables in the corner of the cafeteria. The cafeteria had lots of different sections. The jocks, guys like us, sat right by the cash registers, where we could get food as fast as well as check out everybody going through the lines. Up by the stage, as close as they could get without actually being on the stage, sat the preppy, pretty, popular girls. They liked to be seen, and that worked out well because basically they were being looked at all the time. We jocks didn't dress preppy, but we went to the same parties as them. Most of the cheerleaders came from those tables. Over by the side doors, almost out of the cafeteria, were the goths and emos. The goths were all dressed in incidental black clothes and makeup to show what individuals they were. The emos were sort of diet goth or goth light. They wore less makeup and fewer accessories, like studs and such. They all listened to sad, solemn, deep music. Most of them looked like they were going to break into tears at any moment. If you said boo, they might jump, scatter like birds, or wet themselves, or all of the above. There were only 2 or 3 of them in my old school. Here they formed their own little cheering or crying section. Then there was Cafrica, the section where the black kids sat. Some of the jocks sat with us, but most of them just clustered together in self-segregated group. Martin Luther King may have had a dream, but at this school, the kids were wide awake and wide apart. Hilariously, just over from them sat a bunch of brown and Asian kids who wore bandanas, backward baseball caps, basketball jerseys, even though they didn't play ball. They were sort of pretending they were black. I'd heard the other Chinese kids call them Blackie Chans. Sometimes it seemed like there were as many subgroups as there were tables. In my old school there had been divisions, but not nearly as many as here, and they had nothing to do with race or religion. In this school there were lots of East Indian or Middle Eastern or whatever kids, the brown kids. They even had their own place where they sat just outside the building in the corner of the school property. We called it Browntown. They called it Browntown. I didn't really know any of them. Hardly any of them ever tried out for school teams. Too busy studying, I guess. When the PA finally signaled the all clear, we were told to leave the school by the nearest exit without going to our lockers. That was it. The whole message. No explanation. Nothing. Just get out of the school. You know we can't afford to miss any practices, Kevin said. I knew I was going to hear about it the whole ride home. We didn't play well last game, he added. We won by 22 points. I know how much we won by, he snapped. What I'm saying is we didn't play well. A captain's job is to demand the best from everybody, every game. You have to learn that. I had lots to learn. I was just a junior and relatively new to the school. I wasn't even an assistant captain. That honor was reserved for seniors. But I also knew what was happening. It was a tradition at our school. Every year, the coaches, captains, and assistants selected one grade 11 player. It was somebody who was a starter, somebody they thought could be a leader, somebody who would be the captain the following year. That was me. Ever since football season started, I had been spending more time with Kevin and the assistant captains than my friends from my own year. It was different hanging out with the really cool football jock seniors, and it wasn't just during school time. I went to all the best parties, the ones that those preppy popular senior girls went to. Suddenly, girls who last spring hadn't even noticed me as I walked down the halls turned and said hello, and were all friendly. Football was a good thing, and being Kevin's friend was even better. Kevin always drove me home after practice. He had the coolest car in school, including the teachers. It was a dark blue BMW with a killer sound system and a 6-speed stick. Kevin was rich. Well, his family was rich. We pulled over to the curb in front of my house and I climbed out. You need a ride tomorrow? He asked. My mother said she can drive me. Are you sure morning practice is still on? It better be on. See you at 7. Later, I said. I pushed the door closed and he roared away. I looked at my watch. It was just past 3:30. No homework. All my books were trapped in my locker, and we'd been ordered to leave without going to our lockers. I had a free evening. It felt like a gift. I'm home, I yelled as I started to kick off my shoes. Jay, my mother exclaimed. She rushed out of the living room, wrapped her arms around me, and gave me a big hug and held on. Thank goodness you're okay, she said as she released her grip and looked at me. Why wouldn't I be okay? The news. It's all over the news. I can't believe it. A terrorist at your school. What? I gasped. A terrorist. He was a student at your school. Come on, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Get serious. There was no terrorist. It was just a kid from my school. A kid who was part of a group of terrorists. The authorities have arrested 17 people across the whole city. They were members of terrorist cells that planned to blow up schools, government buildings, and the subway. It's all over the news. She gestured to the living room where the TV was on. I have to call your father and let him know that you're home safe. She rushed away. Stunned, I stepped towards the TV, but stopped as I realized I still had one shoe on. I kicked it off, went to the living room, and sat on the couch. The TV was blaring, and the picture on the all-news channel showed a reporter standing directly in front of our school's main entrance. Across the bottom of the screen, in large letters, was a banner that read, Live. Before I could even catch any of what he was saying, the scene shifted. It was another reporter standing in front of what looked to be like an office building. Behind him were dozens of regular police officers and those special cops with helmets. Some were carrying shields. Marching between the two columns of police were 5, 6, or maybe more men. Their hands were cuffed and their heads were covered so they couldn't be identified. Was one of them the guy from my school? We are watching, the announcer said. The arrival of some of the suspects who were arrested today in a massive operation that involved over 300 officers from 3 separate levels of government. In a series of simultaneous raids across the country, police arrested suspects in alleged terrorist cells. I grabbed the remote and turned the volume up even louder. While information is still limited in this breaking story, we can report that police sources have indicated that thus far 16 adults and 1 juvenile have been arrested. Juvenile, the kid from my school. While police have not confirmed or denied that more suspects are being sought, it is believed that more arrests are imminent and the reporter stopped mid-sentence and put his hand against his ear. I figured he was getting a message in his earpiece. We now go live to the police headquarters for an announcement. Once more the picture changed. There was an empty podium with about half a dozen microphones attached. Reporters with cameras and more microphones huddled in front, shuffling for position. 3 men in police uniform came up to the front, and one stepped up to the podium. He pulled a piece of paper from his breast pocket, unfolded it, and straightened it out on the podium. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," he said. He sounded nervous, and his voice cracked over the last word. Underneath his picture, a graphic banner appeared, identifying him as Police Chief Timothy Brown. "I will read from a prepared statement," he said, his head down. "Today, our force, assisted by federal forces, initiated a series of fully coordinated raids designed to arrest members of 4 terrorist cells. There were 17 people arrested. They had been under surveillance for the past 6 months, and their intent and actions have been closely monitored. This morning we arrested 2 suspects who allegedly attempted to purchase a quantity of ammonium nitrate, a fertilizer which can be used to make bombs." "Oh my goodness!" It was my mother. She was standing right behind me. "That's what they used to destroy that building in Oklahoma." I shushed her. I wanted to hear the rest. Along with attempting to purchase the material needed to make bombs, one suspect was also carrying a list of schools, subway lines, and government buildings where we believe these bombs were to be carried, placed, or detonated. In addition, these suspects were engaged in recruiting and training more terrorists at a remote wooded area north of the city. The chief paused and took a sip from a glass, sitting on the side of the podium. He looked nervous, but who could blame him? All of the suspects are citizens, either born in this country with landed immigrant status or recently obtained citizenship. While these are allegedly homegrown terrorist cells, we have reason to believe that they are connected with international terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda. "Wow," I said. It was more like a gasp. That was just crazy. No way could a kid from our school be part of any terrorist cell, and certainly not one connected to Osama bin Laden. Is that why there were so many cops at the school? Did they think he was hiding in the cafeteria? Through internet connections, in chat rooms, and through telephone conversations that had been traced, monitored, or recorded, authorities were able to piece together this conspiracy. The chief said, "In fact, when the suspects purchased what they thought was ammonium nitrate, the fertilizer had been replaced by a harmless substance. The public was never at risk." That was slick. You have to give them credit for being smart. Due to the ongoing nature of the investigation and the extreme sensitivity and scope of the operation, further information will not be given at this time in order not to jeopardize the ongoing investigation or compromise the rights of the accused to a fair hearing in court. He looked up. "I will not be taking any questions at this time. Thank you." He walked away from the podium, and he was bathed in the flashes of 100 different cameras. The picture cut back to one of the reporters, the one standing in front of the big building. "To recap," he said, "in what is becoming the largest story of the day internationally, police have made arrests in a conspiracy involving 17 people who are alleged to be part of a conspiracy that ties to Al-Qaeda. It has now been confirmed that in addition to attempting to purchase material to make bombs, specific government and public locations were identified by the group as potential targets." "Your father takes the subway every day. I can't believe anyone would bomb our subways." "Why not? They bomb trains in Spain and subways in London. Why not here?" she asked. That thought jarred me. I didn't have the answer. Why not here? Look, there's your school again, Mom said, pointing at the screen. There was a scene, obviously pre-taped, showing all the police cars, the lights flashing, parked everywhere on the pavement, on the sidewalk, even up on the grass by the football field. I clearly recognized the scene. It was a different angle of what I'd seen from the roof. One of the alleged offenders arrested, the announcer said, is a student at Central Secondary School. The picture switched to the two students being led out of the school in handcuffs. The camera peered through the officers at two suspects. One was facing away, but the other looked almost right at the camera. He looked familiar, I thought. He was maybe a year older than me. A senior. Brown skin, a little growth of hair on his upper lip and cheeks, dark, dark eyes that looked angry. The camera angle was blocked by one of the officers, and then it snaked around to the second suspect as he turned around. I couldn't believe it. "I know that kid," I gasped. "You do?" "He's in my geography class. He sits up front at the side. His name is—" I struggled to come up with it. I knew it was something funny. It started with an H. "Haroon. His name is Haroon. I can't believe you had a terrorist in your class. I can't believe that kid is a terrorist. He just sits there taking notes. He doesn't even answer questions. He's the quietest kid in the class. Isn't that what you always hear when they interview the neighbors of murderers? He was so quiet. He kept to himself." Actually, that was what they always did say. "I just can't believe there was a terrorist a few seats away from you." "There wasn't. They let him go," I said. "So obviously he wasn't a terrorist. It was just a mistaken identity. A lot of those brown kids looked the same to me." The screen changed to an inside shot of the school. Two police officers leading a dog down the deserted hall. This had to be after the lockdown was ordered. Police brought in both dogs and the bomb disposal robot, the announcer said. "There was a bomb at the school?" my mother questioned anxiously. There was now footage of a strange little mechanical robot rolling jerkily down one of the hallways. It was by the shop classes. That made sense. Most of the brown kids chose to have their lockers in that corridor. The remote vehicle, the announcer continued, was used to open and examine the contents of a locker that belonged to the alleged suspect. Unofficial sources claimed that there was no explosive or toxic materials discovered at the school. "Thank goodness," my mother said. "They obviously didn't check out the chili surprise in the cafeteria," I said. "How can you joke about something like this?" my mother asked. I shook my head. "I guess it's because none of it seems real. I just can't believe that some kid from my school could be part of a terrorist plot. If the police say he is, he is." "Haven't you ever heard of innocent until proven guilty?" I asked, parroting something from my law class. "Don't you think the police would be 100% certain before they made these arrests?" she asked. "Didn't you hear what the police chief said? They have all sorts of proof. The police didn't arrest. The police don't arrest innocent people." "Ever?" I questioned. "Not in a case like this," she said, shaking her head. "Thank goodness for our police forces. It sounds like they stopped something terrible before it happened." Without her saying another word, I knew what she was thinking about. Everybody had seen the pictures on TV. Subways, trains, the Twin Towers, London, Spain, New York. I think we can all breathe a little easier now. "I don't know about that," I said. She gave me a questioning look. "Didn't you hear what he said about there being an ongoing investigation? Maybe they're going to be arresting other people. Maybe even at my school." My mother looked genuinely worried. I didn't believe that. I just liked making her worried. "Do you really think there are more terrorists at your school?" I laughed. "I told you, I can't believe there are any terrorists at my school. Nothing like this ever happened at your old school." "That's because nothing ever happened at my old school. It was so much smaller, and everything moved slower." "Thank goodness you found such nice friends here, at least," she said. "It was close there for a while," I said. "I wasn't sure whether I should hang out with the guys on the football team or the terrorists." "You shouldn't joke about something like that." "Okay, I'll get serious. I'm seriously hungry. Is it possible for me to get a little snack before supper?" "That can be arranged." She bent down and gave me a kiss on the forehead. It was like I was getting a little old for that, at least if somebody was around to see it. My mother went into the kitchen to make me something, and I returned my attention back to the news.